Okay, it looks like most people are done or finishing up, so I will go ahead and get started. I just want to say welcome back. I hope that you've all had a great month. It's been about a month, and that if you got a spring break, that you enjoyed that. Also, I hope that you've been able to be safe and not had too much damage with the wind. I know we were talking about it earlier, Hannah and I, and the wind has just been brutal in all fronts. And so, I'm actually in New Mexico at my grandmother's house today. And so it's nice here, but I'm glad to hear that also the wind has calmed down over there. So we're gonna pick up a little bit where we went, where we finished last time. Let me get my screen up ready to share again. So again, this is session two of our communication toolbox. And today we're going to do a little bit of review and quite a bit of practice on some of those things. Both of the things we'll be reviewing and discussing and talking about the things that we will be learning about today. I'll talk about media tools and nonverbal communication. We'll also talk a little bit more about the self. The self matters. We'll talk about some of those strengths. I know that you guys do the blue EQ, and I'm going to have you guys do another personality that gives you a great summation and some tips in specific situations. And so we'll spend some time doing that and talking about the personalities, and then we'll also talk about just some challenges, talking about our conflict styles, a little bit of the trials of conflict, and then we'll continue to work that through in the problem solving and working with all kinds of different people in our next session. So this is what you can look forward to today. Let me get to shrink this part. Sorry, I had all of our faces everywhere. Okay, so the first thing that we will do is we will review and practice. So the first thing I want to talk about is mindfulness, and we won't go into breakout rooms for this. But for those of you who were here in the last meeting, I talked about mindfulness in terms of building your ability to focus and to listen attentively, your ability to concentrate, and it even builds things like empathy, and that is engaging in acts of mindfulness. And we had talked about how that can be through reading, through meditation, through being in just a quiet room, and starting even small because it's very difficult in a very fast-paced environment. And that's what our culture is. Western culture is not just be busy, it's be busy doing five things at a time, right? Um, I getting some feedback somewhere. Oh, there we go. Thank you.
Yeah,
Um,
I just got it muted. Sorry.
okay, perfect. I was trying to find the person I couldn't find it. Thank you for doing that, Hannah. Okay, so we had talked about practicing that mindfulness, and so I'm just curious, and you guys can share in the chat. Are there any ways that you've attempted to increase mindfulness in your everyday interactions since we met last month? And even if you weren't here, are there things that you've done since some of you had spring break? Were there things that you did to just kind of regroup, to try to refocus? What kinds of things have you tried? And so I would love to see that in the chat if you have, or you could even put in there like, what, who has time for this? Absolutely not. I have not tried any of this. So I would love to hear where you've stood or what you've thought about, or maybe you've been so busy you haven't thought another second about it since then. Yes, I agree, Will. Being outside is a fantastic way. There's literally the phrase, right? Like stay grounded. And that really means like actually interacting with nature. And that is so important. Focusing on your breath can be very good for some people. Some people can also, when you think too much about your breath, can create its own anxiety. So know what works for you. Living in the moment, yes, and trying to do one thing at a time can be very helpful. Yeah, I agree. The wind has made nature less desirable, but hopefully spring is going to be nicer to us moving forward. Oh, you cut out caffeine. That's interesting. And I see a sad face. So has that been a challenge, I'm guessing? And have you noticed any benefits from it? I'm curious. Deep clean. Yeah, everything feels good when it's fresh. Oh, journaling is a great thing to do. Thank you for sharing that, Chloe. Journaling is such a mindful activity that it really does build our attention, especially if you do it by hand. There's so many benefits to using handwriting when you're doing that kind of thing in the brain. It just works a different part than just typing. Typing is muscle memory, but writing really accesses another part. Caitlin, some floor time. Okay, I'm curious about floor time. So I think of floor time as like really just literally getting on the floor and relaxing and stretching, but it can also be floor time in like if you're a dancer or an active person in some ways, like having floor time to be active. Oh, thanks for sharing that, Megan. I actually have not given up caffeine. I still drink it. So, um, but I know that it's not the best thing to rely on all the time, right? Yeah, and I agree. Some of you guys are being very honest about that, and I appreciate that. You've not had time to think about it. It's busy. Lives are busy. Calm music is a great way too. And so I'm so glad to see that many of you are implementing these. And if you have not had an opportunity to do that, I just continue to extend that challenge to just practice. Like I said, try 5 minutes. Yes, reading. That's what I've also been doing too, Faith. I've been reading a lot more. Try to practice mindfulness, even if it's just starting with 5 minutes at a time. Really, 5 minutes maybe before you go to bed. You'll probably find some that you'll sleep better. Um, 5 minutes in between activities, even if it's just in your car, put on some calming music and just breathe, set down all digital things, and then try to build up, right? Try to build. It's like exercising. It's like if you're going to go run a marathon, you're not going to go from couch to running a marathon in 2 days. You have to build up to it. And this is the same way. It's just a training our brain, which is another organ, another part of our body that has to be trained to do particular things. So I appreciate all of you sharing that with me. The other thing that we talked about, which the mindfulness helps, right, is having those conversations. We talked about the entry, those small talks, which is really what helps open the door for connecting with someone. And there's a lot of ways to do that with questions or complimenting someone, or even saying something innocuous like, man, this weather, right? Can we be done with the wind? And so you're able to connect with someone in a very non-threatening way so that you can move into those other spaces. And so I want to come back and take some time to practice this again. So we'll be doing some breakout rooms. And I just want you to take a look at this. Remember, you have a greeting, and in a small group, you're going to have someone that takes the lead, and that's okay. It's a good place to practice those leadership skills too. But you're going to preview, ask open-ended questions, just like we've done here. I hope you've had a great break. What's been going on? And then get into the heart of the conversation, which is right over here. And so you're going to spend some time getting to know one another. You're going to figure out each other's names, organization if you don't already know, and then share a short-term goal that you have for yourself as well as a long-term goal. And then after you've had a chance to share and discuss, I'd like for you to create a goal that you have for this session for your group. What is one thing that your group would like to address, and add it to the chat when you return? So I think we'll put you in breakout rooms for Hannah, are you doing that? Do you do the breakout rooms, or do I have access to that? Okay. So
Yeah,
let's do groups. Okay. Thank you. Let's do groups of about four-ish, four, 3 to 5, somewhere in there, small groups, no more than five. To practice this and to share. And we'll give you about 5 or 6 minutes. And when you return into the shared space, I will have one person. So you'll have to decide on that, right? That's going to be part of your duties is you'll have to figure out who's going to enter the chat. And I want you to share the goal that your group has decided on. And if 6 minutes is too long, someone can share a message with us and say, we weren't ready yet, and we can extend it. But we'll start with 6 minutes after you get in. And then so 6 minutes is where we'll close the group, which means you'll have an extra minute to finish up. So it'll be a total of 7 minutes. Sound good? Okay, so as you're coming back, please make sure into the chat that you put your group's goal, whomever was tasked with that, so we can kind of see what your goal is for today in a shared space.
Hey, Dr. Baum.
Hey, do you have a question?
No,
Or are
I
you
just
just saying
think,
hey?
yeah.
Okay.
have you been here the whole time, Farzana?
No, I actually joined in with during the breakout session because I
Okay,
was running
okay.
the theater show. Yeah,
Yeah. I just
Farzana,
want to
how
make
are
sure.
you? How are things?
doing well.
Good.
It's doing
Good, good.
good.
Yeah, you need to send me an email update on life.
I know.
I just want to make sure I've got my attendance good. So just so
Yeah,
everybody knows, I do take attendance.
yep. Good. All right, I see the goals starting to come in. Okay, good. 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 All right. So we want things that are applicable. We want things that help kind of with understanding. Oh, good. Mindfulness. I love that. If we were in person, we would be practicing some of these other things, like as we talked about a little bit nonverbal things today. It's harder to do, obviously, on Zoom. Um, but yes, practicing and learning how to implement, really practicing is the best way to do it. So yeah, reducing stress. And that is such a crucial moment to give yourself because, I mean, the data is clear that the generations today who are, especially those who are in the workforce, so any generation that is still within the workforce realm, have higher levels of stress and anxiety than years before, and the levels of satisfaction and happiness in the United States are lower than they have ever been before. Now, of course, the lowest ever was during COVID, and that's understandable.
Dr. Baum, I think you got muted.
I did get muted. Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, I don't know where did I get muted at?
It just went dark.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just got a notification that said the host muted you, and I was like, was that for me? Okay, sorry. So all I was saying is that the lowest ever for happiness and satisfaction and the highest for stress and anxiety was clearly in 2020. But even before 2020, there was a decrease in satisfaction, happiness, and an increase in anxiety and depression of any of that group, childhood all the way up until about the boomers. The boomers were not having the same impact. Most of them are moving towards retirement. Yes, so during COVID, it was difficult, not only because of the stress of the unknown, but also the isolation, because social isolation is so crucial. It's not part of my thing today, but I will get on my soapbox with that and tell you that you have to be around people, even if you're an introvert, and we'll look at personalities a little bit later. You still have to have a social circle, and it is that social that level and security of that social circle and that belongingness, that sense of belongingness, that enables us to maintain mental, physical, and emotional well-being. Because if we have high amounts of stress and anxiety, there's a lot of research that indicates it can impact chronic health issues. And so they estimate that 40 to 60% of long-term and chronic health issues can be rooted back into things like anxiety, depression, high stress situations, etc. And if you think about it, you can see that high stress is going to do things like increase blood pressure, right? High amounts of stress might also increase stomach acid, and stomach acid might create ulcers, and those ulcers become a chronic issue long term. And that's just another example of that. So in essence, people were most stressed during COVID because they were socially isolated and there was the fear of the unknown. There was so much change in the world. And it's been hard to come out of it. And it's not like it's one of those moments in history where we are changed forever. But the key is to make sure you're surrounding yourself with people and having that social interaction. For the best well being, we know that you need physical touch, and it doesn't have to be romantic, it doesn't have to be intimate in any way, just that connection to other humans, a minimum of 8 times a day to stay at peak social, emotional, and mental wellness. So hugs, handshakes, high fives, even just bumping into someone is that human connection, and is crucial to our overall well-being. So even though that wasn't a part of it, it popped up. And so I thought I would take that moment to share some of the current data on that. Okay, another goal, reaching into the senior citizen areas with art, wildlife, and daily activities. Oh, I love that. I don't know how many of you are working in organizations that are directly connected to an elder population, but I love that idea. Okay, I think I've seen everyone's goals here. So I'm going to close the chat box again and head back over to our slideshow. Okay, hopefully everyone can see. Please let me know verbally if something gets weird, because I don't always see the chat when I have this screen up. Okay, So I hope that you notice also as you were going through this that you had to get to that heart of the conversation. And it might have felt weird if we were like 1 minute left, you're like, oh, we have to have the goal really quick. And you didn't really have time to make the end obvious or have that full closing. And that's how we can end up with a lack of closure sometimes in any conversation. So if you're in a workspace or in your organizations and you're having a conversation about something that needs to happen or a particular project that you're working on, and you get interrupted by a phone call or an email or some other meeting that comes in, you miss that closing. And while it sounds so simple, you really do need that summation to make sure, oh, yes, it's a verification stage. It's where you have a chance to paraphrase. It's that moment in that processing and closing where you're able to finalize what the next steps need to be. And when that can get interrupted, that sometimes we feel like we're left hanging. So that can feel like that on a bigger scale of, oh, I never got to say whatever to someone I was on the phone with. We lost contact. But it's also just in those moments on one-on-one communication, you need that whole process. All right. So like I did last time, I'll embed these quotes that I think are relevant. And this one is by Amy Jo Martin, who says, social media is not a monologue, it's a two-way conversation. And so we often view and treat social media as a sounding board. It's a way where we're sending our thoughts, our ideas, our preferences out into the world and not really thinking about it as a dialogic experience. And it really should be. If it's going to be used at its highest function, it needs to be a two-way conversation and not a monologue. And that goes the same for personal and for organizational. So the media impacts that you need to be aware of is that your social media is your brand. And so you need to know what you're selling. And I mean sell, not in the literal sense, but what information are you putting out there? What identity are you trying to create, both for yourself and for others? And so you need to go back and evaluate, and you may have multiple platforms. You may be operating an Instagram for your organization, and you may personally have a Facebook and a Snapchat and an Instagram and a LinkedIn. And you need to look at all of those, and you need to make sure that if you're using them and if you're sharing them with information or sharing information with an audience, with friends, with family, you have to have a complete platform in order for it to have the greatest impact. So your bio or your profile, which looks different on every platform, should be complete. So don't leave blank spots. I know that there's an essence of safety. Obviously, you don't have to put your social on there. You don't have to put your complete birthday. But let people know, maybe where you're from or maybe what you do or an area that you're in for a living or things that you're interested in, right? So things should be complete if you're going to use it to build your brand. It should be clean. And I mean that in multiple senses, right? So it should be clean and that it's not super busy, that people are easily able to find things that are important. So if you're in LinkedIn, you don't want it to be so busy that they can't find your resume, but you also want to make sure that it is clean in the sense that whatever audience you're reaching to can find that it's tasteful. You're not using inappropriate language, inappropriate words that might not create a good identity or brand for you. And this goes the same. So if you are front and center for an organization, much like I would be, right? I'm a representative of WT. And while I have an individual personal profile in social media, if somebody knows me well enough, they may also be identifying and looking at my personal profiles, right? So they might identify me as a WT representative, but they're going to be looking at my profile, even though it's personal, as still that representative. It's very difficult to separate the two, especially the more visible you are, the more visible in a professional space you are. It's really hard to separate the personal from the professional. So make sure that you're creating a page that is all of these things, but also carefully curated. You have to consider some very specific things about the account that you're using, including the purpose. And I know we mentioned it, I think last time, how each platform has its own purpose. But you really do have to think about not just your purpose, but the target audience that you're working towards, right? So when we talk about social media, personally or professionally in your organizations, there is an ROI, which is an economic term called a return on investment. And so you're putting in sometimes financial resources in order to boost advertising, to boost posts that you're doing, fundraising opportunities. But sometimes you're investing time, right? It takes time to build videos. It takes time to think about an appropriate post to put down. And so you want to make sure that when you're using that time that you're investing it completely and appropriately, and you don't just want to push things out there. You want to make sure that you're bringing people in. And so you want to make connections and network. You should be following other organizations. Your organization should be, or a business should be following related items, right? So WT should be following Amarillo College. We are separate, but kind of on the same wave of purpose, right? And so we should understand what other things are doing in your area. Um, and you also want to think about exploring your target audience. And so with all forms of communication, we've talked about how you should be other oriented, and it's the same thing in our social media pushes. So for your personal and your professional, you want to think about who you're trying to reach. So like for me on Facebook, I am primarily reaching family and friends. Those are people that I know very much in real life. And other social medias might have a different target audience for me personally, right? Now, professionally, I operate the Atterbury Honors Instagram page. And so who is my target audience there? Potential students, current students, family or friends of current students, and also the university at large, right? And so you have to think about messages that are curated for them, not things that you think are interesting or funny or cute or relevant, but things that your audience will appreciate. And if your audience cannot connect with it, they will not be interacting with it. And that is your return on investment. You need to make sure that there is space for them to communicate back to you. It should not be a monologue. It should be a two-way conversation. So there should be opportunities to like, to share, to comment, to ask questions, and then feel like they're getting responses. You also are often investing personal space, so mental health and time, your own space and time. And when you are doom scrolling, that is another time of investment. So think about your ROI for that. If you're like, I have 2 hours, I don't want to do anything but sit here and scroll through TikTok for 2 hours, you are investing 2 hours of your life, and you have to think about what you're getting back for that, right? What is that's your investment, 2 hours of your life. What's your return? And maybe that return is just to be mindless for an hour or so and not have to think about anything too hard. But you also have to think about the value for that for you in that moment. Is that the way that you just decompress? And then just like Sabrina Carpenter, you want to make quite an impression. You have to periodically go back and review those things. Oh, can you hear me still? Okay, I heard something. I thought maybe I lost connection. So you have to go back and review those posts. You want to look at views, number of views on videos, and you want to look at the likes and the shares. Often, especially professional pages will provide some analytics that can give you some up-to-date information about audience. And I can talk about those a little bit more next time if you're not very familiar with them. But the analytics is what will help you know who your target audience is and what they want to engage with, right? And then you also have to think about the responses that you want to give back, because it should be considered a conversation. Even though you're sending out a message to a bunch of people at once or a bunch of things at once, when brands are humanized and they feel like they are making an interpersonal effort from a corporate or nonprofit space, that is when other people are more likely to engage. When they feel like there's a person behind it that is going to respond, going to care, going to be other oriented and provide empathy. So social media does allow for that. It lets us connect quickly. It lets us provide responses and feedback, and it encourages engagement. And if your social media, personal or organizational, is just pushing information out without getting views, without getting engagement or connections or responses or additional likes, if it's not continuing to grow, then you have to step back and say, okay, what's going on here? What direction do we need to maybe take after that? So for your activity for this, I want you're going to go back into your social media or into your groups to talk about social media. And you can select if you are working with a nonprofit that you're operating their social media or you're helping with that, you can use their organizational pages if you want to, or you can just talk about your professional pages, I mean, your personal pages. And in those groups, I want you to reflect on how you're using them personally and professionally. And I want you to talk about these measurements. Just looking over it, is it complete? If you are operating it for your organization, it is, or even look at your organizations, is it a complete profile? Do people know what the organization does? What is its purpose? How is it funded? What do you need from the audience, which is your area that supports it? So make sure it has a complete profile, a complete platform. Is the audience clear? Do we know who you're actually targeting, personally or professionally? And then in what ways have you connected or engaged? Are you somebody that just, never posts anything, you don't like anything, you're just kind of there? You're wasting a lot of time on social media without any kind of return on that investment. So take a few moments, go back into your groups, let's say 5 minutes, 4 to 5 minutes, to kind of just talk about your personal and any professional pages. Even if you're not operating the page, go look at your organization's social media and see, is it complete? Is the audience clear? And kind of brainstorm what's being done well and what you think might can improve there. Okay, welcome back. I think we have just about everyone. So I won't have you guys rehash kind of the things that you talked about in there, but do take time in between now and our next session to really kind of audit your organizational and or your personal pages and make sure that you are using time wisely, that you are investing in a way that makes sense for you, and that everything is ready to go based on the audience that you want to connect to. So take time to audit your pages for next time, and that'll be something that we'll revisit as well and kind of talk about any of the challenges or maybe some of the holes that you think that you were able to change a little bit for yourselves. All right, let me go back to this. Okay, so we are also going to talk a little bit about nonverbal communication, and we'll extend this more into our next session as well, because what you don't say matters. Nonverbal communication is crucial in our understanding, in being competent in communication in both our personal and professional lives. And so before we get started, I'm going to have you guys watch a TED Talk, and hopefully you'll be able to see it. There's not any issues, but as she's talking, she's going to describe what it means to be a looker, a listener, or a feeler. And she's going to ask you to think about something, and then to think about inside your mind's eye, how you envision that, right? How do you experience a memory in your mind? And it will help to determine whether you're a looker, a listener, or a feeler. And she'll talk about those and give some more examples of what that looks like. And the reason it's important is because it helps you identify not only what your nonverbal style is, but it helps you identify other people's. And that way, again, you can curate messages to become other oriented with others. And so I'm going to get this TED Talk up and hopefully we'll be able to get that viewed. It's about 10 minutes or so.
I'm not hearing anything yet. I don't know if it's
Okay, nope, that's good. Thank you. I think it's I have my AirPods in, so I think I need to take my AirPods out for people to be able to hear it.
Hi, I'm Lynn Franklin. I have one question for you. How would you like to be a mind reader? Because part of me is thinking, I bet your mind's thinking, that's not going to happen. Here's the truth. People's brains process information, they think in 3 different ways. And their body language will tell you all day long what their primary style is. You just need to know what to look for and what to do when you see it. And it's not one of those where she's leaning back, her arms are crossed, she's frowning, so she must be unhappy. It's actually understanding how their brains work and then presenting your information in a way that people can see it, hear it, and feel it, and increase the chances that they'll say yes to whatever you're proposing, and also decrease the chances that you'll do something stupid. Like this. Back in my 20s, before I knew any of this stuff, I had a client who was a corporate controller, and he would sit across from me in meetings, and he was always looking down with the occasional glance up. And I thought, okay, well, he's a numbers guy. He just feels comfortable looking at the numbers. And then as time went on, I thought, well, he's just socially inept and he doesn't know how to give me eye contact. And finally, because I was young and stupid, I thought, every time he's looking up, he's looking at my chest and I'm offended. And there was one point I actually went in a meeting and went, excuse me, I'm up here. Ooh, yeah, talk about judgmental. Here's the scoop. This guy's brain worked in a way that he was never going to give me eye contact. And no matter how many times I modeled the behavior I wanted him to use, all that did was make both of us feel uncomfortable. So how can you tell? How can you read people's body language to read your minds? We're going to show you right now. And that means I'm going to bring out our first body language model, James. Thank you, James. James represents 75% of the world. You didn't know this about James, but James is a looker. What that means is that James's brain thinks in pictures and images, And here's how we can tell that James is a looker from his body language. First thing, he stands up tall. He has good posture. Second, he's dressed well because appearance is important to lookers. The next thing you'll notice about James is that he holds a little stress in his shoulders. Lift up your shoulders a little bit. Yeah, holds his stress there. Next thing, you'll notice he has wrinkles in his forehead because James looks up when he remembers something he has seen, and he looks up more often than most of us do. Next thing you'll notice about James is that he has thin lips, suck them in. And, this is a chicken and egg thing. We're not quite sure why lookers have thin lips, but most of them do. And the other thing about lookers is they give you lots of eye contact. Look at them, look at them, look at them. All of them. Look at all of them. Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Okay, now that you know that James is a looker, here are the two things you do to build rapport with him. The first is that you give him lots of eye contact because he literally believes if you do not look at him, you are not paying attention to him and you are ignoring him. The second thing you do with lookers is you give them words that have a visual component to it. I see what you mean, or look at this, or let's picture working together this way. So you use the type of language that is going on in James's brain. Those are lookers, 75% of people in the world. Our next body language model is Marge. And Marge represents 20% of the people in the world. Marge is a listener. What this means is that Marge's brain thinks in words and sounds, And this is the body language that you will see in a listener. First, Marge, not as well dressed as James because appearance is not as important to her. Sorry, Marge. Next, Marge has a tendency to look down and to the left because that's where you look when you are remembering something you have heard. Next thing you'll notice about Marge is that a lot of times she'll put her head in her hand. It's called telephone posture. Other things you'll notice about Marge is that she has a tendency to mumble to herself. Go ahead, mumble. And it's not that she's crazy. It's that she thinks in words and sounds. So she's really literally talking to herself. Another thing you notice about Marge, yep, she's the pen clicker and the banger on the pen on the table. These are listeners, 20% of the people in the world. Thanks, Marge. You want to appeal to listeners. You do two things. First thing, you do not give them lots of eye contact. It freaks them out. That's exactly what was going on with that corporate controller. So what you do is that when they're speaking, you look at them and then you look away. And when you're speaking, you look at them and then look away. The second thing you do with listeners is that you use words that are auditory. That sounds good to me. Or let's talk this over. That's the type of language their brain uses. So you're using that to appeal with them. Listeners, 20% of the people in the world. And our final body language model is Marina. And Marina represents 5% of the people in the world. Give her a round of applause. Marina is a toucher, not what you think. What that means is that Marina's brain thinks in feelings and tactily, And here's the kind of body language you will see in a toucher. First thing, and the biggest tell on touchers, is whether or not they've ever met you before in their lives. They are ready to hug you. Second thing you'll notice about touchers is that they are dressed for comfort rather than style. Next thing is that they have full lips, give them big lips. Same thing, I know, more touchers have full lips. Next thing you'll notice about touchers is that they have a tendency to lean in because they're trying to decrease the amount of physical space between you and them and build rapport that way. Touchers also have a tendency to reach out and touch your arm when they're in conversation with you. And touchers also have a tendency to look down because that's where you look when you're remembering something you have felt. Thanks, Marina. All right, you want to build rapport with touchers, 5% of the people in the world? Here are the two things you do. If you feel comfortable, let them touch you. Appropriately, please. But if you don't feel comfortable, because a lot of us, if you've never met somebody before and they're ready to give you a bear hug, the last thing you want to do is go, because we've all done that and it does not build rapport. So if a toucher is coming at you and you don't feel comfortable, stick your hand out. Give these people a point of contact with you. That's what they're looking for. The second thing you do with touchers is you use language that either has a feeling to it or is tactile. So I want to hear how you're feeling about this. Let's get in touch. Reach out and tell me what you think. That's the kind of language that appeals to touchers, people who process information in feelings and tactily. So I'm going to read your mind again, and you're probably thinking, so which one of these three am I? Let's figure that out right now. What I want you to do is close your eyes and remember an important memory. Now, this could be something from your childhood, maybe your 10th birthday party. It could be something that happened to you last week. So an important memory. Now I want you to pay attention to how you're remembering it. Are you remembering it like a movie or a series of pictures and images? Are you remembering it by hearing what people said or describing what happened? Or are you remembering it how you felt or how things felt to you? Okay, open up your eyes. How many of you remembered it like a movie? Right, most of you. How many of you were describing it to yourself, remembering what people said? Right, listeners. And finally, how many of you remember how you felt or how things felt to you? Right, now you know who you are. That's the good news. Here's the bad news. You're going to treat everybody else as though they think the same way. And you've already seen how awful that can be when you're working with a corporate controller who has a different way of thinking. Here's my invitation to you. I want you to start paying attention to other people's body language to figure out how they think. Because here's the magic part of it. Once you start presenting your ideas in a way that they get them, they will say yes to you more often. But here's the scoop too. I'm not asking you to become somebody else because you can't change how your brain works. It's true. You think in all three ways, but just the way you have a dominant hand, you have a dominant style. You can't change that. But what you can do is accommodate your language, both body and verbal, with the people you're with in order to build rapport, which allows you to reach the full spectrum of people that you're hanging out with. And here's the other magic thing. You don't even have to be in somebody's presence to figure out how their brains work. Interested? Right. All you need to do is listen to or look at the words they're using. So if you're in a phone conversation, listen for the words. If you're reading an email, look at the words. People who are lookers will use more visual language. People who are listeners will use more auditory words, and people who are touchers will use more feeling and kinesthetic words. You don't have to be in that same space to know who they are. So here's my challenge to you. Go back and read some of the emails that you have sent And you will notice, now that you know who you are, the kind of language that you're using, and it'll back that up. It happens with everybody. So 10 minutes ago, you didn't think you could read people's body language to read their minds, and now you know what to do. So practice this stuff on the people at home and the people at work. And when you do this, and when you use these tools to build rapport with all kinds of different people, you'll become the most persuasive person in the room. Thank you.
Okay, so I hope that you were able to watch that and think, oh yeah, I'm definitely X, Y, or Z. In fact, for me, every time I watch this pretty much, I'm doing this number right here, watching the video, because I'm a listener and I know that. And I discovered that by just having conversations with others about how I see things. And so even something as simple as the word apple, you might visualize an apple. How many of you see an apple in your head? If I say the word apple, 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 and you try to refer to an apple, how many of you see a visual of the apple? Give me a reaction. Okay, some of you. So my brain works like a typewriter, and I see the actual word apple that's going across there. And so as I'm listening to people, I'm not visualizing the things that they're saying or the information that they're sharing. I am seeing everything in words because I'm processing their language. And then there might be those of you who thought about the apple, but you didn't see it and you didn't see the word. And instead you thought about the crunch of the apple, or the bright redness or green of an apple, or maybe the smell of an apple, right? So I forgot to ask, how many of you think that you're a listener? You see things in words. Okay, I see Caitlin. You can either raise your hand visually or you can give me a reaction. Okay, good. How many of you think you're a feeler? Like you experience the world through textile things. Okay, yeah. And if you are neurodivergent, it's much more likely that you are a feeler, and that those textures and those experiences are going to resonate a little bit more with you. And so I'm very much a looker. I mean, I'm very much a listener, but I have to understand that when I'm talking to other people, I have to be other oriented, which means figuring out what they are first and sending messages in a way that makes sense to them. And that's what it means to be a competent communicator. You have to encode those messages so that the other person can grab that message, open it up, and understand what you're trying to say. And if you're trying to send it in the way that you would understand, you're not going to reach everybody at once. And I saw somebody in the chat say, I'm a little bit of a feeler. And just like she mentioned, we all do all of these things, but we have a dominant way that we think and engage in these situations. So let me go back to, oh, you know what? Let me get my AirPods back in. That'll probably be helpful too. I hope. Okay, so let me re-share. There we go. Okay, hopefully you can see the slideshow again. Okay, so again, this is just really back to nonverbal communication. And this would be where we would practice a lot of this if we were face-to-face. But these are some important things that you need to think about as you encode messages for the other. You want to remember that about 70% of our actual communication competency is happening through nonverbal communication. Now, we live in a Western culture, and in that culture, we process things surface level very directly. And so we're often thinking about the words that were being said or typed or posted, but that does not give us the depth of what we're really looking for. And so what matters more is how it was said. What matters more is, were they looking at you or looking away from you? Were they in a close proximity? What tone did they use? What excitement level? Was it loud? Was it quiet? How were they utilizing this information, right? And that is what gives that richness. Unfortunately, even though 70% of our communication competency has happening via nonverbal interpretation, we're actually not great at it because we do focus so much on the direct message. The whole idea of what did you say to me instead of the what is all the contextual environmental factors that contributed to the way this message was sent, right? That is not our default, especially in Western culture. Eastern culture, very much. They focus largely on nonverbal messaging. That's why eye contact, proximity, handshakes, bows, etc. Those are all very structured social cues. our social cues are really about giving eye contact, right? We learn that we actually stand about 18 inches to 4 foot away from someone that we're trying to have a conversation with. That way, we're in kind of a bubble space with them. But because we do not focus on that, we are only about 60% accurate, right? So if we take a look at this meme here of Dear Scarlett, you could interpret her facial expressions and think about how she might be feeling, because that's what facial expressions do. They provide some type of messaging system for how we feel internally. That's their primary delivery, primary purpose and function. So just, you can either put it in the chat or say it out loud. What do you think she might be feeling here? What do you think is her current emotional state? Upset, annoyed, disgust? What else do we have? Maybe angry. She smelled some bad cheese. I like it. That is also very possible, right? Oh, disdain. That's great. Good. Okay, look at all of these options. Now, you can pretty much, you're in a vein, right? You're under an umbrella of she's not just the happiest person in the world right now, right? But it's really difficult to tell exactly what that emotional state is. So we're not great at interpreting what they're actually trying to communicate to us. We're just pretty good on a continuum, right? 60% accurate. The two facial expressions that we can get almost all of the time is happiness, because that is our eyes and our face and our mouth, and things literally lift upwards. And so that's one of them that we get universally across all cultures. And does anybody have a guess what the second one is? And if you guys have been in my class, I hope you know this. What's the second one? Anybody know? I'm not seeing any guesses. Oh, sad. You would think sadness, but sadness can look a little bit like a few other things too. Sadness does just mean some droopiness in general, but you also might be really tired and look sad. Oh, see, we like disgust, and disgust really kind of came on the scene with Inside Out, right? Like everybody's like, oh yeah, I can feel disgust. Oh, intrigued, fear. Fear is close. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and tell you the second emotion that we're actually really good at interpreting is surprise, because it's big eyes and big mouth. It's right. It's a big surprise. And so it's related a little bit to fear. But there's a lot of other emotions, and we're usually sharing emotional blends through our nonverbal messaging system, which is why it's hard to say, is she annoyed? Maybe. Disgusted? Possibly. Also maybe judging. So there's probably a blend of things going on, and we can really just try to interpret the best that we can on a continuum. Now, again, neurodivergence is going to play a role in this. People who are on the spectrum are going to be one of two ways. They're either going to hyper focus on these things in an attempt to mask and adapt, or they're not going to recognize the nonverbal cues at all, right? So you have these two ends of that particular spectrum. But the bulk of individuals fall in the middle of about 60% of the time. Now, you can identify some subgroups that can better interpret these messaging systems. We know that female identities can do this better because females are allowed to be more expressive in Western culture. And so you know what you do. And if you're allowed to be expressive and share your thoughts and your feelings and your emotions, then you're going to be able to identify them in other people more, right? And masculine identities tend to have to neutralize, and they're harder to read, but they're also harder to interpret other people. That's why you have to be sometimes more direct with individuals who don't use a lot of expression. We also know that when we use expressions, this is very important for that message richness, is that people comprehend your message quite a bit more. So there's a significant level of understanding when you combine messaging systems with nonverbal messaging. So the facial expression, the tone, the hand gestures. Most of the time we don't gesture with our hands unless there's an audience, because the gesticulation is meant to help with communication. Now, this is a crossover in our mediated communication, which lacks richness. We attempt to recreate it with emojis and emoticons, but ultimately emails, messaging, DMs, text message, those can create some confusion, some misinterpretations and inaccuracies. And so it's very important in those moments to ask for clarification, even if it's mediated, or maybe say, hey, I have a few additional questions. Could we meet for a few minutes? And so you have to be very careful about the way that you're interpreting those messages, and that you're very careful about getting clarification and not being afraid to paraphrase. And so, and I will tell you right now that employers, especially, they are excited about individuals who are willing to ask questions. You're not assuming, nobody should assume that they're going to know everything or be able to get everything the first time. But if you're willing to ask questions and get clarification so that you can do a better job instead of having to redo something that didn't go well, that's going to go a long ways for employers. All right, so my next quote, knowing others is wisdom and knowing yourself is enlightenment. And so I want to take a moment to, not a moment, this will take you a little bit. So I'm going to give you some time on this as well. And this is the 16 personalities assessment. And I am going to put the link for this or the website in there for you to go in and take this. And some of you have probably taken one like this. It's probably very similar to the Blue EQ. I can't remember exactly how they list the personality types, but this will give you a good snapshot of some of the areas this will impact your life. And so I'm going to leave this up here while y'all are doing it. And I'm going to give you about 15 minutes or so to do that. And so after you do that, you'll be able to go through and kind of look at some information about yourselves. And through that, as you read, don't pay for anything. You don't need a full report. But as you go through it, I want you to identify 3 of your strengths and how they benefit you personally or professionally or both. I want you to look at the career fits and see what you've learned about it. Do you think you're currently on the right path if you're en route to a career, or if you're working towards something specifically, or maybe you've retired and you're thinking about ways to additionally volunteer. So why or why not do you think what they've said about career fits are good for you? Look at also your personality effects on your interpersonal relationships. How does that play out for you? And then also look at a major weakness for your particular type and how this creates challenges. So I'm going to show you just an example of mine so you know what that looks like. And then I will put that link in the chat for you guys to complete. So let me open up that web page just so you know what that looks like, and you can see what I am and what this will look like in the end, and why you don't have to pay for the full results or anything. And I think you can get emailed to you as well for some. Okay, so try to find this share. Okay, is everybody able to see the 16 personalities page? I hope. This was my personality type. It's the ENFJ, which means I'm the protagonist. And so you can see that I'm more empathetic. I have more idealistic. I have a gift for communication. So I'm already thinking, hey, this is a strength that I'm already using in my career field, right? You can look at your personality traits, and as you go through, you can click on, extroverted, I'm pretty intuitive, feeling, judging, and assertive. So the ENFJ is either assertive or turbulent. And if you're assertive, you're able to manage those emotions. You have a little bit higher emotional IQ. And those who might be in the turbulent realm will need to work on that emotional IQ, which we'll be looking at next time. So that will be helpful for you there. You can look at your career path and see the kinds of things that you want. My very first suggestion is being a teacher, and I've been in education for 20 years. So I think I'm on the right track. So you're able to look at some of those. Here's some other strengths that I have, and the areas for personal growth, including strengths and weaknesses. And then specifically, I want you to look at relationships. And obviously mine is a desire to maintain harmony, but sometimes I can be over accommodating, which I have. So we talk about conflict here in a few minutes, and you'll have to work through being an accommodator. So again, I'm going to put this in the chat. I'm going to give you guys about 15 minutes. Whoops. Oh, I clicked on the wrong button. Stop that share. And then I'm going to give you guys time to do that. And then we'll use it a little bit today, and then we will continue to use that a little bit for our next meeting. So the link is in there. It's sorry, I'm in New Mexico. So it's 2:19. Let's come back together. Well, I'll check in at 2:30 and see how we're doing. Does that sound like a plan? Because it just depends on how fast you read, make decisions, that kind of thing. But I will also leave those questions up so that you, as you're working through your own personality, you're going to be able to identify those things. You can jot them down on paper, make notes in your notes tab for your phone, whatever. So we'll say I'll check back in at 2:30 and we'll see where we are and if you need a few more minutes. Sound good? So you'll have some time to kind of sit with this a little bit. And this will be part of our revisiting when we meet again, is to think about these spaces as you go throughout your days, both personally and professionally, and even privately, right? When you're by yourself, think about these personality styles and how much of is it a fit? And you're like, oh, that's the part of me that's this part, that's the empathetic part, or that's the logic part. Be trying to apply those each day, and just kind of understanding where you're using those, right? See if you can understand where these are coming out of organically in your everyday real life situations. And then we will revisit these when we come back. So if you haven't had a chance to really look at it a lot or really evaluate your results, I'll give you some more time to do that. So let me get back to my slideshow here. Let me close the chat too, because it's hogging my window. Okay, so again, like I said, these are the things to be prepared for next time. Think about the career fits, and maybe if it's not coming up with something, try to Google, try to do a little bit of self-research on that. Be thinking about those strengths and like which strengths do you really see play out in everyday life? Because there's a long list of them, and some of them are going to be more prevalent than others for you. Think about how your personality is positively affecting your interpersonal relationships. Now, remember, interpersonal relationship are those friends, family, professional situations, colleagues. All of those are types of interpersonal where you have a common goal and all of your communication has a content element, something that needs to be said or shared or done, as well as a relational element, something that needs to be built connected with someone. And then be thinking about the weaknesses and what challenges you might encounter. So we'll revisit this for our next meeting. But I do want to move into conflict, which is where we ended last time and started this time. And Rohan Jadhav says that conflict delayed is conflict multiplied. Now, no, I won't say nobody. There are some people who really, really thrive in conflict. They do well thinking on their feet. They really like to debate. They encounter and engage in a lot of different spaces. And sometimes it's really just about that competitiveness, right? They want to win. They want to be right. They want to convince somebody. And in those moments, they really do kind of like that conflict. But for the most part, everyday humans don't like conflict in our bubbles, right? We like it over there. That's why we watch so much reality TV. That became a big thing. That's why we become fascinated with social media influencers that also have this kind of turbulent background, like Gypsy Rose, right? Like there's nothing but conflict surrounding her, but still there's this pop culture fascination with her. And so we have to understand that conflict is not something that we love, but it is a part of just being human. There are always going to be challenges that you're having to work through and manage. And you do that by understanding how you approach conflict generally, how that can impact your relationships, and then how you can better approach those so that everyone has some element of success coming out of it. The one thing you have to know is that conflict is inevitable in just human situations and engagements. There's no way that you're going to that's why every single utopian novel has the society basically crumbling back, because we are individuals, we are built independently. Even if you have an identical twin, you have not had an identical experience in life. And so it's important to understand that just with different people, like 8 billion of us on the globe, right, we're going to have some conflict. But it's also important to understand that conflict is really meant to solve problems. Conflict does not have to be the end all for a relationship. Now, sometimes it is. Sometimes you find that there's no way to compromise in a space in your relationship, and conflict is what's letting you realize, hey, this relationship isn't going to work as it is, and it's time to step back or go our separate ways or find a new job or whatever that is, right? But you can't do that without trying to manage it first. So let's talk about these styles. You should have been one of these styles depending on how they worded it, but there's competing, avoiding, accommodating, collaborating, and compromising. Now, compromising is ideal. That's where we all want to be when it's possible. So I'm going to go from the bottom up. Compromising is where, collaborating and compromising both. Compromising specifically is where you know that you've got to give something up, but it's worth it for what you get, right? So maybe you're willing to move from the place you grew up even though you're having to compromise, because now you get to go support your partner with their dream job, right? So there's some compromises, and then you also get to have a new experience, and maybe y'all are moving to Paris, by the way, whatever, right? So this is where both parties win, and you both might lose. And so in that winning category, like, I'm leaving my family in my hometown, but I'm going to make sure I come back at least 4 times a year, right? That might be the compromise, that I will go, but I'm coming back often. And so there's this meeting of halfway that you want to do if you have a compromising style. A collaborative style wants to bring everybody to the table, really listen, really be mindful, really try to understand what each person needs. A conflict is just about trying to meet needs in a relationship. And so in a collaboration, you're trying to figure out if there are unique solutions where everybody gets their way. Then there's the accommodating stage, which is where a lot of people find themselves because they don't really want to deal with conflict. And so they just accommodate. They just want to maintain the peace. They want everyone to be happy. They want everybody to like them. But what happens is that this person specifically never gets their needs met. And so, as we talked about that long-term chronic stress and that long-term chronic anxiety, accommodating can come with that because it can feel like it doesn't matter. Like, oh, I don't care where we eat. Sure, we can go there. I'll just find something, no big deal. And that is true. But if that is the way every decision goes in your life, that you're giving up more than you're getting, you are eventually going to be an empty cup, right? And so you can accommodate and you can avoid sometimes when conflict is not worth it, when there's no benefit to the conflict or it's not going to affect you long term. But for the most part, you want to make sure that you're more on the assertive side. So that was part of some of your personalities, is having that assertiveness. And assertive is not aggression. Being assertive means that you are directly and clearly trying to share messaging, you're trying to solve problems, and that's what you find in collaboration and compromising. So accommodating just always means sacrificing yourself for others. When you're avoiding, you just pretend like it doesn't happen. You don't even want to talk about it. You just want to move on. Or sometimes people, this is where the ghosting can sometimes happen. I don't want to deal with the conflict, so I will literally just vanish and fall off the face of the earth, right? And then the competing, which can be beneficial, is because there can be some elements to like being extra assertive or being able to think quickly on your feet, right? And even being persuasive. When you're trying to get a large collective of people to buy into something, if you can have that competitive nature, you're more likely to get people to buy into that. However, the competitor is also going to sometimes move into that aggression or that blaming category, where if I can't convince you, then I'm going to kind of just demean you, right? Like, well, how would you know? How would you know about X, Y, and Z when this is what you've studied in college? Or how would you know about this if you've never had kids, if you've never done this, right? And so there can be an element of blaming or aggression to say that they're trying to take away your power and trying to overcome you in that way. And I see something's been added to the chat, which I think is great advice too, is not to suffer with peace at any price, because it's not true peace, and it isn't. There's peace for some, and there's an element of peace, but it's not a long-term peace. So when we want to avoid conflict is when it's not safe for us, right? If there's a danger to you or someone around you. You want to avoid conflict if there's no long-term impact, right? Like, okay, the guy next to me at Starbucks is kind of being annoying in the way he's drinking his coffee, but I'm about to leave, and what difference does it make? Why ruin my day and theirs, right? Why expend that energy? Because conflict is about energy. It takes a lot out of you, even if the end result ends up going well. Conflict can be exhausting, and so it can have an emotional impact on you as well. So it's important to understand what your style is as you get into that. And so think about the benefits and the challenges that you have because of your conflict style. And then understand emotional awareness, which we'll talk about a lot more in our next meeting, and that emotional IQ is crucial to being able to manage, collaborate, and compromise, because the key in conflict is to not take it personally, right? Either party cannot take it personally, that you have to hope that the other person wants what's best for you, and that is how you're trying to solve the conflict. And if you find that someone is very self-serving, that is a competitive relationship as a whole, and they are never going to put your needs first. If you have a competitor and an accommodator in a relationship, or a boss employee, doesn't matter what kind of relationship together, this is going to be a challenge long term, and the accommodator is usually going to have, like you said, no peace at all. And so an individual's ability to clearly express in words what they're feeling and why is crucial. That's why Inside Out was just fabulous for this new youngest generation. My youngest daughter is almost 9 and she's Gen Alpha, right? And so they are able to understand that, hey, we're all feeling these emotions, sometimes multiple things at once, and being able to label, being able to sit and think, why do I feel this way? Is there something that's causing this? Is there someone that's causing this? And what needs to be addressed? What need is not being met? And how is there a way to meet that need? And then it's also an important component to be just effective and to have that high communication competency, because if you are willing to share, the other person is also more likely to reciprocate and be willing to share. But what happens is that we get driven by that emotion sometimes, and we're unaware of that state, and we have a hard time communicating about them. I know there are people who can get very flustered and they just get angry, right? And they might stomp out and slam doors. There's people that just shut down or they start crying, because it is literally called flooding for a reason. You are flooded with this particular emotion. In the olden days when I was a child, last century, you could flood a car, right? Like if you couldn't get your car to start, you could flood it, or you could flood this with a lawnmower, right? So some of the old motors, and you would flood it and it wouldn't be able to function. And we're the same way. Sometimes when we let this build up and we let something ruminate or continue on for too long, then we get flooded and we have a difficult time separating the real issues and trying to solve a problem with that. So as we work through this conflict, we'll really practice in our next session how to move past this using high emotional IQ. And so it's really important to think about your emotions. So as you encounter conflict in the next few weeks before we meet again, I want you to really think about how you feel when the conflict comes up. If you're a collaborator, are you like, all right, great, I got to just solve this problem? Do you find that that's true for you? If you're a competitor, do you find that you're ready to just take it on? Like, come on, bring it on. I have all the information. Or do you find that you slink away from these difficult challenges? And so be highly aware of not only what you do, but how you feel when that happens. And so bring that with you to our next session, where we will talk about that emotional IQ and how to use positive emotions to de-escalate conflict. One of the things that can feel like conflict for us, but is actually really necessary for growth, is called constructive criticism. Oh, Calvin, I just saw that. Thank you. I don't know if I missed you, but thank you for being here. So constructive criticism can feel a lot like conflict, because someone is trying to tell us something that we're not doing great at. And nobody wants to hear that, right? We want to feel like we're doing our very best, and our very best is being successful. So when you have someone that is offering you this, you have to hope that they are motivated by helping you grow, right? They want you to improve and they want to help you be successful long term. And you'll find this especially in the places that you know that's what they want. Might be a parent, it might be a professor or a mentor, that they're saying, hey, this is a challenge for you, and I think this is how you could really benefit from improving it. So I want you to think about things when there's criticism that comes up. Consider the context. What is the context of this criticism happening in? Is it in private? Because that's honestly the best place for it. You don't want to do it in public spaces. You don't want to have people that rush into this face-saving idea, because that's when the emotions start to flood. So you want to try to provide or receive constructive criticism in private spaces. You want to know what the motive is. Why is someone doing this? If they are doing this publicly, it's rarely to help you grow. It is probably to create an imbalance of power, and it may be a way for them to compete with you and to damage your reputation. So it's very important, if someone is doing this in a public space, to understand why they might be doing it. But most importantly, try to understand that the motive that you're offering criticism should be more altruistic, right? So you don't want to provide things if it's not. You want to avoid you and but language. If you're providing the criticism, you want to be sure not to use these types of words, because it sounds like a verbal finger pointing. If you say, you always do this, or you never do that, but like, if you're a great employee, but, right, all of that takes away the power of the words. And so you want to be very clear when you're sharing the information with someone. So if you're a boss and you're working with your employee, you want to make sure that you're complimenting them on what they need to do. And then to say, I want to help you grow in this direction, right? You're still using that I language and you're still providing those areas of growth without saying that, hey, you're not great at this, right? So again, you want to be direct and specific. You want to be clear. If you want someone to grow or change, you have to tell them what they have to do. And if you're just like, I don't know what it is, but you need to find something different, that is not helpful in any situation, professional or personal. You also need, if you're the one receiving criticism, you also should accept responsibility. If you're receiving criticism about, being late too often, you might say, you know what, I am, and I will get better at that, right? So just being responsible, owning the things that you have control of. And then sometimes accepting responsibility means, oh, wow, I never thought of that. I'm going to look up more information or figure out how to do that, right? So sometimes accepting responsibility is just acknowledging the places where you don't have all the information you need. If you're giving the criticism, you want to provide feedback and follow up, right? So if you asked an employee or a colleague or a romantic partner to change their behavior, and you notice that they do change their behavior, please follow up with them. Let them know, hey, I appreciate what you're doing. Or maybe you see they're making efforts, but it's not getting them where they need to. You can still follow up and say, I really appreciate you doing this. Is there a way that I can help? Or here are some ways that I could help, right? So you want to make sure that these are constructive, that these are helpful, and it's not just about power. So you don't want to attack their character, who they are, their beliefs, their ideals, their values. That is something that is off the table. Physicality, any of those things. You do not attack their character. Don't deny anything that's true. Are they wanting you to be to work on time and you're late often? Okay, don't say, oh, I'm not late. Say, yeah, you know what, you're right. So accepting that responsibility is important. Don't be vague. Want to be clear. Don't overlook suggestions, right? If someone is giving you tools to improve something that could benefit you, accept them on that. Take that from them. And then don't forget that critique can provide growth. And so we're all changing beings, right? From the moment we're born until we die, we have opportunities to grow and be better at whatever it is that we're doing. And so if it's a constructive criticism offered in the right context with the right motive, try to hear them out and see if there are ways that that can benefit you. So I'd like for you to just take a moment. I don't know if we'll have time for partners, but I want to give you, let's say, 2 minutes to write a brief critique to yourself following the rules of constructive criticism, right? So you're going to critique yourself, so just a little bit of a practice. What is something that you're doing well? What is something that you could do better? And how might you do that better, right? So just give yourself those 3 bullet points. And I'm going to give you guys just 2 minutes to do that. Ready? Any questions on that? Okay, ready, go. Okay, so for just the sake of time, we won't share with a partner and reflecting on that. But think about it for yourself. Are there ways that you're even too harsh for yourself? Are you attacking your own character, right? That's called vulturing, when you're not saying, okay, where am I challenged? And how can I improve those, instead of just defaulting to, oh, I can't do it because I'm stupid, or I'm not able to, or I'm whatever. So don't attack your own character either, but have an honest conversation with yourself and understand that you have strengths and weaknesses like we all do. And how can you focus on the strengths and use the strengths to improve? So remember that as you're working towards growth in your personal lives, in your organizations, and when you're working with people in any collaborative space, the value of this. So make sure that as you're going through this, that you speak with empathy. This applies to all categories. We've talked about that already, and we'll continue to, that empathy and being other-oriented are critical. Empathy does not mean agreement. You can empathize with someone and not agree with them. You don't have to share the same values or belief systems, but you can understand where they are coming from, why they feel the way they feel, why they think or do or say or speak the way that they do. And sometimes it's really just because they've never been provided with a different example of how to do something, right? And so empathy allows us to wear the other person's shoes, look through their glasses, whatever metaphor you want to use. It's not agreement, it's understanding. It also helps us to know that we have different lived experiences, and it lets us to focus on the issue and not the person, especially when we're providing criticism. That's why we don't want to attack character. We want to focus on the issue. Like, if you're weak in writing And if you struggle in writing formal emails, well, let's work on how we can improve those, right? And so focusing on the issue and not on the person is critical. Showing interest with active listening and open-ended questions. So be sure that you're allowing people to speak. You're not trying to make assumptions. And another important thing with empathy is don't just quickly offer advice or solutions, right? You can ask them, hey, would you like to hear what I would do? Or I've experienced this before. Do you want to hear that? Make sure that you ask if people want that, because sometimes people really just need some empathy and want to be heard, right? Communicate gratitude for sharing and learning. So when someone is sharing that with you, thank them, reciprocate if that's something that's appropriate in that situation. So sharing information and experiences of your own. And then, of course, again, with conflict, you want to avoid that conversation if the risk is too great, the relationship's not important, or it's not going to matter too long for now. So this is just a very brief activity to finish up on empathy. I just want you to think about your favorite color. If you're reflecting on your favorite color, mine is blue. I love blue. I've always loved blue. It's been my favorite from the time I was a child. And I have to think about why it's my favorite. I often get the question if it's my favorite because I'm a Cowboys fan, big Cowboys fan. But it's not. I mean, blue's always been my thing. Cowboys have always been my team. Maybe there's some kind of synergistic relationship there. I don't know. But blue's my favorite. It's my favorite because it's calming, it's rich, it's deep, there's a lot of depth to it. And that's why I love it. And it has always been my favorite, right? But now, what if you have a different color? Someone else has another color that's better. And what if they want you to change your favorite color? But you can replace that with anything else. And so that's what it means to have empathy, because it sounds silly, right? Why would I want someone to change their favorite color? But it's also asking someone sometimes to change their values, their ideologies, and their beliefs. They're important and part of their core. And that is what having empathy is understanding why their color is their favorite color and not expecting their favorite color to be yours. So as we finish up today, I want you to remember that media is active, not passive. So please take some time to revisit either yours or your organization's pages. Make sure that you're understanding who your audience is, that there's actual engagement. It's two-way and not one way. Think about the power of I and we and that nonverbal communication and richness. We want to understand to use words where we own our experiences, own our emotions, own our own power, and not try to project things on others. Understand that conflict is not about termination of relationships, but instead it's about finding solutions. And the next session, we will be talking a lot more about emotional intelligence and how that will filter through all of these elements. We'll do some hands-on media practice and some games and look at practicing some actual problem-solving scenarios.